Co-parenting is universal. One state may call it shared parental rights, one may call it custody, but in the end, it's parenting through divorce. We call it co-parenting.
Okay, so I would love to introduce our amazing panelists, Chris, Leddy, and Alana Powers. But first, I'd like to just give a little bit more background on who the Kids First Center is and who the Family Online Safety Institute is, and why we decided to partner together today for this webinar. So I'll first talk a little bit about the Kids First Center. So we are located in Scarborough, Maine, and we are committed to supporting families facing the challenges of co-parenting and transition. Chris, if you wanted to talk a little bit more about who the Kids First Center is before we get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, FOSI, for teaming up with us. This is a question we get as I work as a guardian ad litem and a family attorney. So I get this question a lot, like, what do we do when our 7-year-old wants a phone? That's a tough one. At Kids First, we really strive to limit the stress. It's not the events that happen legally that hurt children or make it hard on children. It's the stress of those things. And so much of what parents do, we don't have a script for. So what we try to do is teach people some of the basic dialogue that can help you avoid some of the pitfalls, not necessarily cure things right away, but make the tone better. And that's really all that kids need, is to have a basically solid, friendly tone. And as much as it's a hard ask, it is very important. And we're called Kids First because if you think of your kids first, a lot of this stuff becomes second nature. But thank you, Ellie, for a quick little talk about Kids First.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I really appreciate that. And Alana, I'll talk a little bit about FOSI, but you can jump in and let me know if I'm missing anything. But so the Family Online Safety Institute is an international nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. And FOSI is dedicated to making the digital world safer for children and families. FOSI works to promote online safety through a diverse range of initiatives, including education, advocacy, and collaboration with industry leaders. FOSI develops resources and best practices to empower parents and caregivers in guiding children's online experiences. And by fostering a dialogue among families, technology companies, and policymakers, FOSI aims to create a safer online environment, ensuring that children can explore the internet while minimizing risks and protecting their privacy. Did I pretty much get it, Alana?
You did a great job, yeah.
Perfect. So Kids First in FOSI felt that it was really important to come together to discuss how best to utilize FOSI's online safety tools for co-parenting families. We know that it can be really difficult and stressful to stay up to date on how to keep your kids safe in the virtual world and how to work with your co-parenting partner to make sure that you're on the same page about what's going on. So our hope is that you're able to take away some tips and best practices from today that make you and your family feel more confident about how to keep your kids safe online and how to communicate about it with your co-parenting partner. I do also want to mention that you may have noticed me and Chris using the term co-parenting partner. And at the Kids First Center, we believe that the language we use is really powerful. So we use the term co-parenting partner when referring to the person who you are parenting with, including if you are separated or divorced. We avoid using terms like ex and say the term co-parenting partner because it centers your child and the role that you and your co-parenting partner play in your child's life. I just wanted to point that out because we'll be using it throughout the webinar today. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce Alana and Chris. I know Chris already talked a little bit about himself, but I'll give a little bit more background. So Christopher Leddy is an attorney with Ainsworth, Thalen, and Raftis in South Portland, Maine. Having started his family law and criminal defense practice with ATR in 2010, Chris is a regular speaker at family law and guardian seminars throughout Maine and teaches classes at the Maine Criminal Justice Academy to police cadets. He's also a seasoned facilitator for most, if not all, of the Kids First programs. I think there's only maybe a couple you haven't got here.
Right.
And more of Chris's bio is up on our website, so please go check him out. And then Alana is the research and program specialist for FOSI. She leads FOSI's Good Digital Parenting programming and research projects and supports FOSI's communications efforts. Her prior experiences focused on both media and education. Alana has a master's degree in media studies from the Newhouse School of Public Communications at Syracuse University. And again, she's also very impressive, so please check out her bio on our website as well. All right, thank you both so much again for joining us today. And so to everybody in the audience, please feel free to put your questions in the chat as you think of them. We can try to address them in real time, and if not in real time, we'll try to get to them at the end of the webinar today. So, given that both of these subjects, the online world and co-parenting, can be really uncertain and stressful things to talk about, I think it would be really great to start off by hearing from you both about what keeps you in the work that you do and what keeps you hopeful. So Alana, I'd love to start with you about what's making you hopeful about the digital world and child safety in the online environment.
Yeah, thank you, Allie, both for having me on this webinar today, but also for opening with this question. I think there's a lot of fear and anxiety around the online world, which of course are really warranted feelings, but it can keep us from recognizing, the more positive aspects of our online world as well. So lately, I've been feeling really hopeful about tech's role in social well-being specifically. So we're actually working on a research project right now that we'll be able to release in December. But we heard in our focus groups that online connections are really helpful for kids when it comes to maintaining a sense of social belonging to their peers and friends and family, especially those that they aren't physically close to. And then to bring it down to an anecdotal level as well. So FOSI hosted a webinar with youth about like 6 weeks ago. And during that webinar, one of our team participants spoke about how she was like obsessed with the play Hamilton, but none of her friends at school were interested in Hamilton the way that she was, like, at all. So she found a community online full of people who love to talk about Hamilton just as much as she did. And she was able to forge really great connections that like weren't available to her like IRL or, in real life. So this type of positive social connection that can be fostered in the online world makes me like super hopeful, for sure.
That's great. Thank you so much, Alana. And that makes a lot of sense. It's really cool that kids can find that community and a sense of belonging in the digital space. So thank you. And Chris, I'd love to now hear from you about what keeps you in the work that you do and hopeful in the co-parenting space.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And thank you again for the participants for calling in or, for Zooming in. It's interesting because there's a balance to be struck between what we do as attorneys and educators at Kids First with personal contact. That's how we started, right? We started with classes where people were present. What is super encouraging and what keeps me hopeful is the use of the digital space allows us to reach so many more people in such an easier way. For a lot of people, coming to a program is a little tough to do. It's hard to think of going to a room with people you don't know and talking about difficult subjects. Whereas if you're in the digital space, you can come in, you're comfortable, your cat can climb across your keyboard, nobody says anything, and we like people to access the more information. So there's so many things, and Alana just touched on many of them. For some kids, the digital world is their link to the outside world. We all know, as people that have worked with kids with disabilities, some kids on the spectrum really need some sort of a dialogue with the digital world. And for some parents, a lot of parents, it's scary. I joke sometimes that having a 12-year-old around is the best technical support we have, but we have to understand that they grow up with it as a normal thing. And a lot of us who are older and who are in our professional lives, we know certain tools, but other things are scary. So I'm very hopeful that the use of technology can actually decrease the fear about it and increase the range of being able to touch more people.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had my cat walk across my keyboard many times, and it's just, because we
Yeah.
can work from home and it's great. So thank you both so much for sharing and getting us off to that positive start as we dive more into the content of the webinar. So Alana, would love to now hear from you about what people and parents should be looking out for with their kids using technology.
Yeah, thank you for that question too. As much as I'm so super glad that we started on that positive note, I think it's so important to address the concerns too. So I'm definitely looking forward to addressing this side of the coin as well. So to move back into some other research we've done recently, we recently did a survey in which we asked parents and kids about their concerns when it comes to using technology. And I think there's a few things to note here. So, parents and teens' top concern was what we called social screen time. So, that includes things like messaging apps and social media. And while I think there are a lot of pros to using these platforms, once your kid is old enough to be on them, um, there are such as like the examples that I mentioned before about the social connection and things like that. There are definitely still things to look out for. And through this research, we saw that parents think this too. So, my advice for parents who are feeling concerned about this type of social screen time is to research and utilize parental controls. So, start by asking your kids, what platforms are they using? And why are they enjoying them? And what are they doing on them that's so enjoyable? And how are they feeling fulfilled by them? Then understand what types of parental controls are available both on the platform and on the device that they're using. I think these controls can really help ebb that anxiety that parents might be feeling. But also remember to talk to your children and set some ground rules, such as places or times of day when they can't use their devices. And on top of that, make sure they know that they can go to you as a trusted source if anything does go wrong or become uncomfortable for them in this digital space. And you can really get this conversation started by using some of FOSI's resources if you'd find them helpful, like our family online safety agreements or our device safety cards as well.
Yeah, that's great and makes a lot of sense to really start with that open dialogue with your children and ask about what they're liking, what they're not liking, and really getting a sense of what it is that they're even using. So having that communication piece. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
Chris, how have you seen that be able to play out with
Well, I'm
parents?
listening to the great points that Alana's making, and I'm thinking, boy,
Mhm.
I can see some co-parents going, but that means we have to communicate, and it does. And the one great thing about having these things in the digital world is it takes a little bit of the pressure off. So many co-parents, especially in the newest part of a separation or divorce, have a difficult time talking to one another. And that comes with all sorts of emotions, which are natural, but there's a little bit of insulation and a little bit of protection provided by the digital space. And so it's nice that we can use that. But I do think communication becomes paramount when you are talking to your child. You need to both have the same information. So whether one of you gets it and shares it, or you both have pieces of it, the key really is going to be to set up some sort of a basic style of communication, even at a very basic level, because in this particular subject, knowledge is safety. You can't protect your kids from what you don't know is out there. So using these online resources from FOSI and then understanding how to communicate them effectively to your co-parent can really save you and your child from being in unsafe situations.
Mhm. And I feel like part of what you're saying, Chris, is that co-parents can also use technology to be communicating with each other to kind of release some of the pressure of.
It's true. And we tell parents all the time, it's really hard to text and raise kids, but there's so many more options out there. There's Our Family Wizard, there's AppClose, there's many places where you can share information. Maybe it's just a shared calendar, but some way to share information without maybe the fear that's involved in having a face-to-face conversation, because things can spin off. And one of the things we stress is to keep the temperature low. And so having a good presence, between each other online can be very effective in keeping information flowing.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you both. So Alana, you've already started talking about this, but I'd love to hear even more about FOSI's good digital parenting resources and how
Yeah.
parents can use them. I know some they're coming
Yeah.
through in the chat, so that's great.
Yeah. And thank you, Kaylin and Andrew, for dropping everything into the chat. We really appreciate that for sure. So yeah, we have a lot of good digital parenting resources available, and there's a few different types of resources that we have that I can talk through really quick. So the resources I just mentioned before are tool sheets that we designed to help parents and kids talk about online safety and set guidelines. So in addition to the ones that were just popped into the chat, we find that parents really find our 7 steps to good digital parenting and the digital reputation checklist to be 2 other really important and useful resources for them to talk to their families about this type of online safety and digital activity and things like that. So, really, these resources are meant to help guide conversations about family online safety and give parents an outline about how to approach online safety and digital parenting. All of these resources are designed to really start conversations, and they may serve as a good way to engage the whole family, including your co parenting partner, in this type of online safety conversation. We also have resource guides, which are essentially listicles that link out to our other helpful resources. So, to give an example, we have what we call the Safer Gaming Guide, which points families to gaming safety resources, like, for example, the ESRB Gaming Ratings Guide and Video Game Platform Safety Center. So, we have that all curated on our website. So, you can go to a different website that might give you even more information, even more specific information as well. And then we have our expert blog, for which we bring in people who are experts in a certain tech field to write about and provide solutions for a certain problem or concern in the online safety space. And these usually deal with and focus on parenting as well. And then lastly, I'll plug our socials, where we feature a lot of these resources and post more short form videos about digital parenting and online safety. So if reading through all these resources isn't really your style, you can catch us on most of the social media channels and listen to us talk about them instead.
Awesome. So many resources and so many ways to access them. That's great. Thank you so much, Alana. So we did get a question in the chat that's related to what we've been talking about that I wanted to raise for both of you. So it was from someone who said, asking kids which sites they're using, and would it be preferable to monitor their internet history or to have that dialogue?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. So I think having that dialogue, starting it early and talking about it often, is a really good way to establish trust so that your kids know that they can talk to you about what they're doing and online, and then, talk to you about if something goes wrong, as I mentioned before. When it comes to monitoring, I think this can be really dependent on age and developmental stage as well. I think, to give an example, when a child is under 18 months, they probably really shouldn't have like any sort of screen time at all. Then as they age, they can spend more time online within reason. So for more guidance into like screen time specifically, I encourage you to check out one of our amazing partners, actually, the AAP's Center of Excellence on Social Media and Youth Mental Health. They have a resource titled 5 C's of Media Use that actually gives guidance on how to navigate media use throughout each age range in child development. But to talk a little bit more about monitoring, I think it's really important to be aware of what your kid is up to without completely disregarding their privacy. So I think this is an interesting tightrope as a parent to walk, right? Like, kids do have a right to privacy and their own inner lives, but you definitely don't want them to get into trouble or end up in a situation online that makes them uncomfortable or unsafe or anything like that. So I think a good place to start is utilizing these parental controls that we've been talking about. through most parental controls, whether it be through your device, like through iPad or iPhone, or, tablet parental controls, or through the platform that they're using, like a social media platform or a gaming platform, you have a range of options about how to go about sort of like monitoring or just looking into how they're spending their time online. You can set time limits on how much a kid can use an app. You can limit the types of conversations that they're able to have or who they're able to have these conversations with as well. On many popular platforms now, you can limit DMs to just people that they mutually follow. So there's ways to sort of restrict and make sure that they're, at a comfortable place without feeling like they don't have any privacy online. And then there's also certain companies that will monitor when someone sends something inappropriate to your child, and they'll alert you about it without sending you every single thing and interaction that they're having online. So I think doing some research into those, because I think different platforms work for different families, might be another place to figure out how you want to go forward with monitoring as well. And I think I'll just wrap by saying, the way that you monitor a 7-year-old's screen use and screen time should be different than how you monitor a 17-year-old's screen use and screen time. So I think that goes back to the conversation piece and just making sure that you're consistently talking to your child about what needs they need, and then also talking to your co-parenting partner about what you're seeing in them in terms of how much time they're spending on their devices, how they're developing, and ways to move forward in that way.
Thank you so much, Alana. That was a very wonderful, comprehensive answer too. And it can be hard because of the nuance and the gray of different ages. And there's just so many complicated factors that make it hard. But all those resources that you gave too that were linked in the chat, I think should be really helpful. And Chris, I wanted to see if you had any additions or if you had thoughts from a co-parenting.
All I would do from
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. All I would do from our perspective is, again, this comes down to communication. And the thing I'm thinking of as Alana goes through all those wonderful tools, that's a lot, right? I mean, there's a lot of opportunity there for parents to input some, not only control, but monitoring. And Alana's absolutely right. You can't monitor the same for different ages, and you have to teach them the respect that they need to learn. So what we say at Kids First is we want people to manage expectations. And that really comes from a conversation, hopefully quickly, if not already happened before the separation or divorce, about how you're going to handle screen time. If that hasn't happened, then you just have a different place to start from, but the goal is always the same, and ultimately it's child safety. In which you don't know, very simple example from we teach a conflict class where parents who just don't talk much, haven't had any dialogue in a period of time. And I remember one particular couple, they had 5 daughters, and they just didn't talk. I mean, there was an odd text message here or there. There might have been an email, but there was really no dialogue. And I made a point of asking them about 4 or 5 weeks into a 9-week class, how does your oldest think about this class? And what are they thinking now? And they were very candid in offering that their daughter was incredibly angry because now that they're sharing information, and that's just about her whereabouts, that became a big problem for her because now they could monitor where she was and they were on the same page. That's just illustrative of how important it is. That's just knowing where your kid is. The kid can be upstairs in their bedroom, and if you don't know where they are, they could be a lot of places that you'd rather they weren't and that are not good for them. So these tools that FOSI offers are incredibly important, but it's going to come down to the parent communication to make sure that they present them in the right way. Any partnership will have what I would call a division of labor, where one person might be the tech person, the other person might be the person who handles the daily chores at the house. Regardless of who it is, you both want to share the information and have the tools available to you. So much of this is going to be entering a discussion with an inviting comment, not nobody monitors screen time at your house and it's going terribly. Why don't you do what I do? Because that conversation is going to spin out very quickly and go nowhere. So you have to invite people into the conversation and then share the information you each have.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that their child was a little angry because she couldn't get away with as much. And as you're saying, that can really be translated to what kids are doing online too. And if a kid has inconsistent rules and boundaries or is confused about expectations at one house versus another house, like that can just lead to a lot. So the communication piece between co-parents is,
Huge.
yeah,
Yeah,
extremely
paramount.
that makes a lot of sense. Well, great. Thank you both for that. And so kind of pivoting a little bit, just again, talking about screen time and how much kids are spending online. Alana, do you have data on how much time kids are currently spending online? And is there a recommended time that they should be spending?
Yeah, so we actually just got some data on this from a survey that we conducted with kids aged 10 to 17. And we found that on average, kids within this age range are spending about 31.7 hours a week using their screens. And this number goes up as kids get older, which I think makes sense. And it's the highest among girls aged 14 to 17 who spend almost 40 hours a week on their screens. So yeah, it's like a full-time job's worth of screen time a week. So I don't really have a magic number when it comes to screen time. Um, I think as we get into this conversation, we're really talking about the nuance of everything and how I just don't think a magic number can really exist because there is such a breadth of things that kids can do online that we all do online, and therefore like not all screen time is created equal. So I like to talk about it too in terms of screen use, which differentiates between the different types of screen time. So to give an example, there's a big difference between your kids spending hours, mindlessly scrolling through social media versus FaceTiming a loved one versus watching a YouTube video that helps them with their homework. So I instead encourage parents to pay attention to how their kids are using their screens and intervene if they're spending too much time caught in that endless scroll, or if their screen use is getting in the way of their lives, like if it's interfering with their sleep and their chores. And I think, in general, maybe having places around the house that are considered screen-free zones. One that we hear a lot is like the dinner table is a screen-free zone. If that doesn't work for you, to give an example from my own life, our screen-free time for my fiance and I is when we go and walk the dog. So just making sure there's times where kids are off their screens and taking in the real world and having those face-to-face conversations or doing a craft or something else offline.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That and a really good point to differentiate the types of screen usage. And I think, I don't know, Chris, you want to add beyond?
Well, those are great points, and it's interesting because some kids need a little bit more screen time. They just do, and so I'll give you the lawyer answer for a question like that, which is it depends. So, we want to know more about the background facts, and so do parents about each kid. And don't forget that each kid is different. And so many times parents fall into the separated or divorced parents fall into the trap of it's all happening because we're splitting up. It's not. These are natural things for kids to glom onto, and they get into the digital world and they want to look at things. And it can be a wonderful distraction. When you're cooking dinner, it's great to have a kid watching a movie or something like that and staying a little bit out of trouble. But you also want to make sure you strike a healthy balance, which again, you're going to hear it from me ad nauseum, which is going to be communicate and share that information, because certain screen time is okay, as Alana pointed out, but you also want to watch it. I can give a little bit of a stat that I've heard before in our programs. I think the average number of minutes a day that a teenager spends talking to a family is about 6.5. It's under 7 minutes. So that's where parents get caught up and they're on their phone all the time. Well, first of all, make sure it's developmentally something you are cognizant of. Second of all, as Alana said, is it interrupting things? You do want to have family time. It could be at the dinner table. It could be walking the dog, chasing the cat off the screen, whatever it might be for you. But these are just ways that you find balance. And for every family, it's going to be a little different. But to strike a balance, you need to have a conversation. And although that may sound scary, but I'm encouraging parents to, maybe utilize some of the digital tools that allow you to find these balance points.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just want to say, Chris, even though we have these sort of different backgrounds, it's becoming so clear that like communicate, communicate, communicate is really like our top level advice.
Yeah.
So it's good to know that that it applies to all types of parenting for sure.
Everything.
Mhm. Yeah, and Chris, you mentioned our Family Wizard as
Yeah.
a tool for co-parents to be able to communicate. Are there any other tools that are similar to our Family Wizard that co-parents could use?
I'm sure there are lots of them. And quite frankly, I tell parents all the time, I don't really, the name or the label isn't important. If it
Mhm.
works for you, if texting, if email works, then make it work. But it's got to be something that is efficient. For some people, using something like our Family Wizard or App Close is another one that I'm familiar with, has very similar features. They'll allow you to populate a calendar, and then you don't have to call the other parent and say, hey, did you get the soccer schedule? I have it and I put it in the app so you can find it. Those are super helpful because then there's a bit of each of you is doing some work. Nobody has to be quote unquote the secretary for the other parent because that's a point of frustration. And it's easily accessible. Even your kids can access it. I forget when my game is. Okay, go to the calendar. Let's look at it. Those are things that are important, but I'm not familiar with too many, but I know OFW even has a filter for people that have difficulty communicating positively. It might kick something back to you and say, do you really want to say it that way? Maybe it might add a couple more positive things and then ship it off again. Those are helpful for some people, and they provide a level of safety like other separation points that allow us to start somewhere that we all feel safe with, which is very important.
Mhm. Absolutely. Thank you. And yeah, great point to just be using what works for the co-parents and the family and the kids at large. I like the idea of a shared calendar too. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, if you have three kids and they're in, middle school and high school, you're in the
Yeah.
car. You might as well just put a cooler in the back of the car because that's where you're going to be living for the next couple months. What happens?
Well, great. And so this is kind of going back a bit, but talking about that screen time, screen usage. Alana, we talked about this a little bit, but are there any tips for monitoring that screen time and maybe signs that parents should be looking out for if their kid is spending too much time or not using their screens in the healthiest way?
Yeah, I think, if they are becoming withdrawn or if you notice that they're tired all the time, I am not a doctor, but I do know that, of course, as you grow up, those years are very important for brain development and very important for sleep. So I think if phone use is getting in the way of sleep or any sort of screen time, that's really something to pay attention to. And maybe it's time to have a conversation and see how you can go about limiting it. I think we also found in our research too that beyond these parental controls that we've been talking about, there is a lot of space for household rules. So, setting rules that might help limit or the screen time if it's something that you're really worried about, such as you can't have this sort of social screen time or you can't play your video games, etc., until you're done with your homework is one that we found that parents utilize a lot. Or, yes. And I think it's also usually it can be used as a punishment, if kids aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, maybe taking away the screen until that issue is resolved is also really popular among parents. So I think there's other ways outside of just device controls and more in the traditional parenting space that can be helpful as well.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And sort of along that lines, we got a question in the chat. Do you have suggestions on how to communicate digital expectations to the kids themselves? Reference, they have a child who's a gamer. So
Sure.
he's specifically gaming, but others too.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is going to be, and we have this little saying we tell parents all the time, if a kid comes up to you, and it's a trap, right? Your happy kid comes out of school and says, hey, I was offered to join the travel basketball team, and it's going to be great. And you as a parent want to say, absolutely, we'll sign you up. But you can't speak for the other parent, and it's not fair for you to speak for the other parent. So we want parents to start that conversation with their side of it with, mom and dad will talk about it, or dad and dad will talk about it, or mom and mom will talk about it, and we'll get back to you with our decision. Because all those things are wonderful, and we want our kids to have opportunities, but the easiest way to disenfranchise a co-parent is to agree to something that puts an onus on them to do something that they didn't necessarily want to do. The same with digital rules and access and the use of things. I would make sure it's a conversation among the adults when at all possible and pretty detailed, because you know your kid. What are they going to ask? Some kids are going to ask, that's fine, but do I have to shut it off at 10? Yeah, you're 11. You're going to bed before 10 o'clock. You're not going to be up that late. And maybe they agree to shut down the Wi-Fi at a certain hour. There's all kinds of relatively simple measures that don't require us to become IT professionals, because that's up to Alana and her group, not up to me and in our group. So that is something that, but again, it's got to start with a communication between the parents, even if it's just hey, can we talk about, just a lead into a conversation? Can you and I talk about how we handle screen time for our child or children? That's a very simple question. Very few parents are going to say, no, I let them do what I want to do. Some parents do. And it becomes a point of contention, but laying the groundwork takes time, and you're going to have to offer those up every so often as a suggestion. And it's best for your kid if you guys talk first, away from the child.
Mhm.
And I think to elaborate too on the gamer part of that question as well, going back to how so many things in this conversation are quite nuanced, I would also, like I said at the beginning, make sure you know what types of game your kid is playing, and then talk to them about why they enjoy it so much, and maybe even play it with them a little bit. There's research out there that the average gamer is in their mid 30s. So, there's I think video games can be a really good way for parents and kids to start to bond, because video games have been around for so long. We all know a little bit about them. We've all probably, gamed to a certain extent. So it can be a really good way to bond with your child, first of all, but then also figure out a little bit more about how they're spending their time, doing these games. And then I think even within gaming, there's all these different types of games. Some are really educational, like strategy games, and some are more for entertainment purposes. So being aware of really where they're spending their time. And then I know that I mentioned this earlier as well, but if there's a certain video game that you're worried about or interested in, or if you just want to learn more about it, I would recommend that you check out ESRB's ratings guide. So they provide guidance for kids by age and content ratings. So if you see that your kid's spending a long time playing a certain type of game, then you can look it up in their ratings guide and see the suggestions that they give as well. So that would be my follow-up there too.
It's funny, while you're talking a lot, I'm thinking it's almost like the back seat of the car. When you're driving along with kids, especially if they have friends with them, they just start talking. And so when people ask me as a guardian, are you going to interview my child? I said, I will, but I'm not going to sit down across from them and say, where were you on July 3rd at 9 o'clock? That makes no sense to a child. So you just start talking about stuff, but the gaming can really offer a segue that they're sort of in control of. And it's their world that you're entering, which is a big trust builder for kids and parents. If you're willing to be made a fool of and lose every time you go out there and play with this kid, that can mean a great deal about connection. And you never know what's going to grow from that, but it's usually positive.
Yeah, and I love the backseat of the car thing too, because I think often when I'm saying have these conversations, communicate, it doesn't always have to be sitting them down across the kitchen table and talking through it in a serious way. It can be talking in the backseat of the car, talking while you're playing this video game. Oh, do you talk to people you don't know while you're playing this video game? What's that like? Why does this video game speak to you so much? Do you play with your friends? Stuff like that I think can be really productive in the long run of having this online safety conversation.
Yeah, it's a great way to let your kid lead and listen, because that's the most important parenting skill.
Absolutely. And it sounds like that would really take the stress off of we have to have this formal conversation, and it's like they can be snippets at different times doing different things in the car playing the video game. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We did get another question in the chat that is similar to screen time. So does screen time include any TV watching in addition to online guidelines?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm pretty sure that screen time, like that phrase, was invented like during when television was the main concern,
Right.
right? So, you know, the online safety, the tech world have kind of co-opted it a little bit. And I think, yes, again, there's all these different types of screen time. So if your kid is watching a 30-minute TV show on like PBS is like different than watching like very short videos online or on a social media platform. But I do think that TV is included and that it's like everything else when treated in moderation. It's, you know, it's completely fine. I definitely grew up watching a lot of SpongeBob. So, you know, like there's definitely, I think, there's times when it is completely fine for your kids to be watching TV. And if they're watching it all day, you know, it might be time to say, hey, let's go do something else. Let's get off screens altogether and maybe go for a walk or have a conversation or cook a recipe together or something like that.
Yeah, that may be a great segue to talk to your co-parent too and say, hey, how do you get our child to disengage from the video screen, from a movie, from the cartoons they're watching? Because that is in and of itself something you should be aware of. Is it a 10-minute process to shut the TV off? Is it a half-hour argument to turn off the internet? Then those are warning signs that you probably need to get a game plan together and talk to your co-parent and try to come up with something. And you don't have to have all the answers right away. You just have to know what questions to ask sometimes. That's all it takes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, it's a little nuanced too. You have to. That's so funny that screen time, the phrase was introduced for TV. Little did we know there'd be so many
Yeah, it's like
Now there's
like a
so many
rotary phone to
screens.
a kid now. They have
Yeah,
no idea what to do to a rotary phone. What do they do?
right. So I got another question in the chat, and I think this would be more for you, Chris, about any thoughts on parents using an app like Life 360 when one parent has concerns that it could be used to potentially track where the other parent is when they're with their kid. So like a parent checking their kid's location while they're with the other parent.
It's a great question, and I'm sad to say that it happens. I'm sad to say that I've seen air tags planted on things that you didn't expect them to be. I had a parent zip tie a tracking watch to a kid who was 4, and I'm like, unless you have a kid who's an escape artist and he's constantly running away in crowds, don't ever do that. So it's a valid fear. That is something that, again, as part of the digital conversation the co-parents are having, that's an expression that we should have and say, look, even if our child is carrying their iPad or they're carrying their phone at your place, we can shut off tracking. That's fine. I understand. I don't want to cross that boundary, but you have to let it out. And it may be, and I've had parents say, well, I'm going to shut it off when it comes to my house because that's still being done and there's no good dialogue about it. But first and foremost, express that because it's a very valid concern. Nobody wants to be tracked, especially when it's really not that exciting to go, track someone to Smiling Hill Farm to go get ice cream and pet a goat. But people will try to track things. And I get that that's an oogie thing, something we don't want to happen. But again, you have to open up the conversation about it. And I think there are ways, and certainly, FOSI will have more ideas on this, but there are ways to monitor that and to limit it.
Yeah, thank you. That's fair, and it's tough. Like there's so many, like we've been talking about, there are so many benefits to a lot of this technology and ways that it can be used for not the best purposes too.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
well, thank you for that answer. That was,
Sure.
was helpful to hear about. And so I know Alana's been talking a lot about all of these really great tools to use, and you both have really highlighted communication. And Chris, from the kids first side, are there specific tips and tricks for co-parents to communicate about this and about, other things?
There are, checking our website, you can certainly find certain things, but so much of it is going to be about changing the dialogue and even understanding the dialogue. When parents are in the same place, they have an institutional knowledge, I call it, about what happened. You know that the dog woke up at 3 and threw up. You know that your 4-year-old threw a tantrum because the waffle was upside down, which I don't know how it can be, but it happens. And they get upset. And so when you're dropping them off, The other parent doesn't know any of those things. So it's fair to share those types of things and share that type of knowledge, but that comes from a baseline of respectful communication. It doesn't have to be expansive. It doesn't have to be personal, and it shouldn't be. It's personal about the children, but not personal about the co-parent. So the tip I'm going to put out there is to keep it really simple. I mean, there's we've all heard of the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. Well, emotions in humans cause us to do stupid things. So when we keep it simple and try to just keep it very objective and about a focus that we have, which is easily our children, right? We all love our children. And I think keeping it simple and then keeping an open dialogue, and you're going to learn things along the way that you weren't taught. None of us took a class on how do you, separate and divorce well. It's not offered in high school. It's not offered in college. It's offered at Kids First, and it's offered at places that FOSI can send you to. But those are very difficult things. So the biggest thing I'm going to say is start small, start respectful, and keep trying.
Yeah, that's great advice. And it's something that I'm not sure we list on our website, but that we talk about a lot in our classes are the co-parenting phone call. So to have that like scheduled phone call,
And you
however
have to
often
schedule it.
you can,
Yeah, you
yes.
have to, and don't just say we're going to have a weekly call, because that will never happen. It literally has to be, if it's Wednesday at 7 in the morning before the kids are done breakfast, that's when it is. And prepare for it. When you make a phone call to a co-parent and you have a subject, do your homework. Make sure you have some options in there. If it's about a tutoring, if it's about an online safety issue, and said, hey, I found these great things on the FOSI website. Can we talk about them? Maybe share the links before you talk, so that they have the experience that you do, or give them a chance to do that before you try to arrive at a conclusion. But so much of that's going to be about sharing information in a respectful way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one way to share that information too is for the agenda of the co-parenting phone call. You put it all on there. You make sure screen time is something
That's
that you're
right.
talking about. And yeah.
Absolutely. Good point.
Thank you. Okay, so any recommendations, Chris? This is came through in the
Sure.
chat, on how to get a co-parent that does not want to communicate to start communicating. I think that's something we get a lot in our classes too, that question.
It is. And there's no one answer. So again, resorting to the attorney fallback, which is it depends. So one thing I tell parents a lot, because I hear it as a guardian ad litem as well, don't get discouraged and keep trying. The first thing I'm going to tell you is don't go file a motion, because the court, there's no such thing as a motion to change attitude or change personality. It would be great if there was, but we would never leave court. All of us would be in court all the time. So it's something that you have to sort of poke at. I often say to parents, you got to meet your kid where they are. And that means their developmental stage, their attitude, their, don't ever try to fight with a 12-year-old who's angry about a curfew. You won't win, and you're just going to go in circles. But you know your co-parenting partner, you know them to a degree, and you know what might work for them. So be creative. It doesn't matter how the discussion gets started. It matters that you have the discussion in some form. And at some point, you may need to just develop your own guidelines for your child and share them and leave it at that. And maybe that'll open a dialogue. But I wouldn't give up on finding the place to provide the guidelines for the child, because that's the most important.
Great point, Chris. And yeah, that we would all be in court forever if we were trying to get people to communicate. Yeah, I could go on. But so to move on to just a couple more questions that we got. We did get a question that said that they like to share pictures of their child on Instagram so that their friends and family can stay updated on their lives, but their co-parenting partner doesn't want them to do that. So how would you all recommend having that conversation?
Alana, you may know ways to carve out a group, right? I wouldn't know how to do that, but you might. I would say if there's a group you can use it. But otherwise, you sort of have to respect the other parent to a degree. They can't control what you do in your life, but you also don't want to start a point of contention when it's not necessary.
Yeah, I think that this is a sticky one. Like, I think first and foremost, you should make sure that your Instagram account is set to private. Especially within that question, I know you said that it's for your friends and family to stay updated on your life and your child's life. So make sure that it's only your friends and family who actually have access to your Instagram. So even if your account is currently public, change it to private. It's never too late to start. And then go through your follower list and make sure everyone that is following you is a friend or a family member. And if they're not, then remove them as a follower. Also make sure that there's no identifying information about your child in the post. I think this is just good advice generally. So, make sure that there's no indication of what school they go to or other personal information like that. And I feel like that could potentially help your co-parenting partner feel a bit better about the situation in terms of coming to a compromise. I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of parents sharing their children online, especially before their kids are old enough to really consent. So I'd suggest sharing photos of your child via text or WhatsApp in the group that you're referring to of your friends and family instead. Or if you really like sharing on Instagram and posting pictures on your grid and stories and things like that, I would recommend covering your kid's face up with an emoji or not completely showing their face, maybe just like the back of their little head or something like that instead, just in terms of keeping things more private and making sure that they're safe online and can start to build their digital footprint for themselves when they're old enough to do so, which is typically 13 plus.
I knew it. I knew Alana would have the answer. Thank you. Those are tough though.
Yeah, that is tough. But yeah, that's why we have both of you. Between the two of you have all the answers. And so, sorry, we did get another question in the chat. I'm just reading it. Any suggestions if there is a step parent with the co-parenting partner, and though the step parent and the co-parenting partner make the decisions and don't communicate a lot about it, would this co-parenting partner start with personal responsibility with the kids instead?
That's a tough one. I mean, we have a specific program for parents with new partners, and we have that program because these are issues that become very difficult. I talk to parents a lot about this stuff, and with all due respect, if someone is, even if they're marrying Dr. Spock's next incarnation, the best child rearing person on the planet, that co-parent is making the decision, not the step parent. So you really have to keep the dialogue in a closed loop between the two biological or, natural parents. And that's where it should stay. So that's a bigger issue of how do we get there? That's not easy, because it's not that the step parent is not important. They can be wonderful additions to a child's life. The advice I give to step parents is let the children decide what your role is. Do not go in with a role predetermined. Do not think you're going to replace someone, because that's where all of this emotion and fear comes up. So a co-parent should not be making those decisions. A step parent should not be making those decisions, only the co-parents. So I would try to work on some sort of a guideline for that. But we do have a class that's dedicated specifically to that. And I have asked several times on my guardian ad litem cases for a new partner to go to that class, and then we'll have a dialogue afterwards, because there's some things you just don't know yet.
Mm-hmm. That's great advice. And we had a question in the chat, parents with new partners. Yes, that's what the class is called. And will the program also be useful for grandparents?
I think it's useful for anybody. I mean, here's the thing, even when I teach the class, and I've been doing it for a number of years, I learn something every time I facilitate the class because someone shares something. Grandparents are wonderful, but grandparents have to live within the guidelines set by the parents. So, and that's hard sometimes. There are some very forceful grandparents, right? They know better, and I raised you and I can raise your kids. It's a tough dialogue to have, but you have to have it. And again, you have to try to take the time to do that. But I would send anyone who's maybe making the co-parenting relationship more stressful, send them to a class, put them in touch with someone who can talk to them about boundaries, because that's all it boils down to.
Yeah, that's pretty cool that every time you teach the class, you learn something new. I think that says a lot about it.
We're all different, right? We're all different, and there's similar problems, but the approaches can be amazing. People come up with great ideas to deal with things with their kids.
Yeah, that's great. So we are at 12:55. We have 5 minutes left. I'll read one more question from the chat that kind of goes back to the sharing pictures of children on social media. That asked about if those photos of kids could be used potentially for deep fakes and just generally like AI talking about that emerging technology.
Yeah, I was just thinking we only have 5 minutes left and we haven't even talked about AI. I'm sure we could
Yeah.
probably talk
There you go.
all day on this topic too. I think the short answer is yes, and I don't want to make parents super scared that this is definitely going to happen if you've posted your kid online in the past, you know. I think that that is definitely a possibility. And with this emerging technology, we're seeing where it goes. You know, that is really another reason why I recommend not posting your child's face online in case it ends up somewhere that it shouldn't, to err on the side of caution there. We've been doing we've been looking into something newer that's been really ramping up more at the middle and high school level called Nudify apps. So we have a resource called Understanding Nudify apps, where it really is like taking the face of a fully dressed person and putting it on a naked body, usually without consent. So we are seeing issues like that among children, and usually it's children committing this against other children. So if you would like to look a little bit more into that, we have a resource about what they are, and then how to talk to your kid about it and what to do if this happens to happen to your child. And yeah, I think there's definitely concern there. And that's why I really recommend, you know, the private settings and things like that.
Yeah. Thank you, Alana. That's terrifying and also really good to have this resource out there. So thank you so much for sharing that with folks. So we do have now 3 minutes left, and I just wanted to ask you both if there's any last or major takeaways that you want folks leaving the webinar today taking away.
Yeah, I can start. I think throughout this webinar, of course, we've been talking about all this communication, but I feel like this webinar and this experience with Kids First in general has really opened my mind to, you know, we talk all about parents talking to kids, but the importance of parents talking to parents as well. And just making sure that the whole family is involved in these digital parenting conversations and how important that is to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So I think that's really what I walk away with, is that it's a family oriented conversation to have with your co-parenting partner and your kids, and everybody involved in raising a good digital citizen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would second that. Only on the other side of it, meaning use the tools that you see in FOSI to not only have some of these conversations, but inform yourself. Because so much about what we are talking about today is getting information so that you can keep your child safe and improve their experience in general online, because it's a ubiquitous part of all of our lives now. We can't get away from it. You know, it's really, really difficult to get out of range for your cell phones for a lot of us. So it's important to know that something so pervasive can have controls, but you have to talk about it. You have to learn a little bit about it, which isn't as scary as I thought it might be after hearing what Alana is telling us and what FOSI offers. And then fall back on basic, good, respectful communication as the foundation for any of these co-parenting issues.
Yeah. Great points. And it is really amazing that we could come together. Thank you so much, Chris and Alana, for taking the time today to have this conversation. And I also wanted to mention that Kids First and FOSI will be working together to put together some more resources that really touch on both digital and online safety and how to do that in a co-parenting partner family, because we know that can be complicated. So we'll be working on those resources. Might take us a couple months to come out with those, but we will be getting those out. And the webinar today was being recorded, so we will be sending that out to everybody who registered and it will be up on our website as well for folks to access. So if anyone wants to fill out our feedback survey, that will be sent out in the chat as well. We would love that feedback so we can improve our future webinars for you all too. So thank you all so much. And thank you again, Chris and Alana. This was very informative. I learned a lot and just really appreciate both of your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Same.
much, Allie. This was great.
Yeah, it was. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.